add to this. As you know, the government published
this group.
Sorry, Chairman.
Yeah.
As you know, the government published a National Council Strategy last year. The steering group deliberated on that and developed that over about a 2-year period. Professor Harry Comer was on that. I was on that. There was a lot of discussion about the best way to organise cancer data to give access. And that there was discussion. There were recommendations in the final document. There's an aspiration to improve systems. But that's what was happening during that 2-year period.
Like for people outside now watching this, and trust me, thousands of people are watching this, even up to this hour, the idea, like, you can understand and appreciate the idea that between the National Cancer Registry Ireland, which reports directly to the department, isn't that right? And cervicalcheck, which comes through the HSE and up to the department, and it couldn't get its act together across data protection issues. It's a laugh. It's a laugh. And like this is actually causing. We don't know what problems this has actually caused yet. In fairness, I don't expect you to know, but this will cause problems. I guarantee you when this report is done, this will have caused problems. And that is absolute bloody incompetence at some level somewhere. I want just information. So is there two-way transfer on bowel screen?
There's no transfer at all with bowel screen.
So we're doing this all over again. Because I'm going to say something to you. Are you going to sort that out?
There's no audit process, as I understand it, in place as yet. And when it is, then discussions will happen.
But
to clarify, I have asked the Minister for a two-way data transfer agreement with the HSE entirely that will cover all its.
When did you ask him?
When we did the specific use for here, and I've brought it up before since GDPR has become an issue.
So in the last few weeks?
Well, no, it was brought up many times in relation to GDPR.
Because let me just say something to you here as a prediction, right? And in a previous life, I actually spent 4 years building a database. It's a different story. But you haven't got permission for the people who have already gone through. Like, you haven't got two-way permission. You haven't got two-way permission.
For cervical check?
No, for bowel screen.
We don't have any
at all
with them, nothing.
So it's even worse.
Well, they're not doing auditing, or they haven't come to us. There's been no discussions.
But wait a second. When it comes to auditing, into the future, there will be auditing.
Yes, probably.
Individual consent at that stage. I just say to you, this is the current data protection legislation. Wait until GDPR comes in next week, and they won't even be allowed to talk to the person on the computer beside them.
Don't even start.
I think the problem for
as a former MEP, I'm embarrassed by that.
It's our fault as legislators.
It's actually, as a former MEP, it's at a different level, but we're responsible too. But Mr. Henry and Mr. McKenna, you've had time. You know all these documents that I'm referring to, okay? And in fairness, earlier on, without me even raising it to another deputy, you spoke about when you became aware of the issues, right? And I wish, and I say this, Mr. Conaghan, I wish Mr. Woods and Mr. Lynch were here so we could round the circle as regards who knew what here. In fairness to Mr. Henry, it looks like he made some form of efforts to try and escalate this. I'm saying that too. Mr. McKenna, you were aware of this. Like these documents, like which are published now on the PAC website, and actually, you know, in fairness, it's good to have them, and I think every hospital, like. Reading these is incomprehensible to normal people, because at the end of the day, Vicky Phelan is watching this, and there are families out there watching this, and they don't understand why somebody doesn't just shout stop. Right? I mean, and I genuinely say this, Mr. Conaghan, I mean, directors were aware of this. At directorate level, Mr. Woods and Mr. Lynch are aware of this. Mr. Woods said he referred it back up, if I remember rightly, to Dr. O'Keefe. I'd like to see a copy of that, because we don't have a copy of it, so please supply it to the committee. I'd appreciate that.
Got a note of that.
Please.
A copy of?
Mr. Woods earlier on said he referred it on up to you, across to you, sorry, we are at the same level.
He referred what to me?
The letter that he was copied on in 2017, July the 13th.
No, he didn't refer that on to me.
So who did he refer it on to?
I think
he said he referred it on to.
we might check that. Maybe we can go back on the record.
Do you think he referred it on to yourself, Colin?
check it out and get it.
Well, Mr Conaghan, will you ask Mr Woods who he referred it on to, since we now don't know? And I'd like a copy of who we referred it on to, who we don't know, if you can follow my logic.
No, certainly. I think we also need to check the record earlier as regards what exactly is said.
I agree with you, because if we can't remember, it shows. And this is not to catch either of you out, because that's not ultimately what I'm trying to do here. But I would presume that looking through all of this correspondence, which all of Ireland can digest now, I would presume that when this was escalated from the actual hospital, and to be fair, the hospital CEO moved it on, and Mr Burke, and I'd like to see what happened in all the other hospitals, all the other general managers, see what they did. I presume, in hindsight, I mean, the letter on the 22nd of the 8th from Kevin Hickey to Gráinne Flannery, in which Colm and Peter, you're both, Dr McKenna and Dr Henry, you're both copied on. Like, it's fairly, like, the detail, like, he's pretty annoyed. I mean, Dr Hickey is saying here, instead of what basically was happening, he says it is totally inappropriate. Like, this letter is pretty, like, he's pretty annoyed. And, like, what I really want to know is, in relation to the actions or non-actions that happened afterwards, do you think something different should have happened to what did happen?
There is correspondence after, because I wrote back to Professor Flannery after that letter.
It's in here.
Yes, and I told
there we have it.
Yes, and I told her that the situation was that the clinician in Limerick remained dissatisfied. What she had said was not in harmony with what he understood. She replied to me on the 8th of September stating on the front of that, so on the front of that, she had a meeting with clinicians and assured me on the 8th of September that she had listened to their concerns and apologised for communication difficulties and was going to change things. Now, I'm a clinician, and as working in my clinical world, when a senior clinician tells me, whether it's a GP or consultant, that they're going to do something, I presume they're going to follow through. I don't feel I have to assure myself they're going to say they're going to go ahead and do what they actually said they were going to do. And the same, I was in here with not just as senior clinician, but somebody who is medical director of the service.
I know, but ask you this, and I'm genuinely not having a go at you, but obviously this had been moved across to the directorate, they were well aware of it. Somebody, somewhere, should have followed up on this, surely.
Deputy, I wasn't aware. The only awareness I had was the communication I got directly from the clinical director and the CEO of the University of Limerick Hospital Group.
I know, but when this was put across, and you worked with the director of acute, is that right? You were basically working for him.
Yes, I was a clinical advisor for his patient, that's correct.
I mean, if at hospital acute level, because when nothing happened for 15 months, as I understand it, Dr Hickey then elevated it within the hospital. They hadn't any idea about this. No idea whatsoever, because they weren't copied, as we now know from Ms O'Keefe, or Dr O'Keefe, that they weren't copied on the June 16 documentation at all. To be fair now, they weren't. They didn't know about it. It's amazing. The 7 group hospital managers in the country were not made aware of it. But, like, do you not feel that, as advisor to the acute directorate, that there should have been some form of follow-up, that this had to be escalated? Like, if inside in one hospital group it was such a concern that this really, and you see from the letters that they're really deeply concerned, that surely the acute section, and I know you're on the clinical side, but surely at a management level there should have been a follow-up action. And if Dr Woods, or if Mr Woods was here, we'd ask him, but he's not, of course.
Well, as I stated at another joint committee with you, if I'd known that patients weren't going to be told, I certainly would have pursued it more. And certainly if I'd known it was such a significant issue before, I would have pursued it more. At that time, I was taking assurances from someone who was a senior clinician and medical director of the service, who told me in correspondence that she believed it was the correct thing, if any doubt existed, that people should be told, and informed me that she was telling patients herself.
Clinical director of the programme.
of the cervical screening program.
I understood.
She wrote that.
Yeah, we have all of that. Sure, we have the list. It's a famous letter at this stage, I'll be honest. But I just don't understand at the acute level, and I wish Mr Woods was here, because I don't understand why there wasn't follow-up. I am saying that to you directly, Mr Conahan. Sorry, Mr McKenna. Thank you.
Well, I would agree. I wish we had followed it through, but we were of the understanding that the meeting between the programme and the colposcopist had sorted the matter out.
So this famous September meeting, that there was an October version of as well, which has never been minuted. Which, by the way, can somebody follow up on how in the name of God can they have a meeting and not be minuted? It sounds very suspicious to me, one. And you felt that this, I'm not getting at you, but that's what you understood, that they were having a meeting.
Yes, to sort it out.
And as it turns out, the meeting was really to design the brochure. If you break it all down.
Yeah. But yes, I was...
Isn't that frightening?
To put this into context, we weren't aware of the fact that this had been rumbling for 18 months beforehand. This is something that we came in on, and we thought it was something that could be readily enough sorted out. And I was of the belief that when they met and they communicated that the matter was sorted out, that it was.
So when they told you that they were meeting up and they were going to sort it out, it was going to get sorted? And you didn't feel, obviously, because you thought it was sorted, that there would be any need to follow it up?
Well, I did follow it up with a phone call, and I was reassured that...
What date?
I can't recall.
Okay, I'm not going to stick you to the date, but how far past this meeting?
It would have been, I would imagine, after the second meeting.
So after the October meeting?
Yeah.
I still find it bizarre which turns out these minutes are very important for this meeting. There's so many of them, by the way, who didn't bother to actually partake in it, that there are no minutes to the next meeting. The first meeting was called, was the September meeting. It actually, I say, came together because of this issue. Let's call a spade, and yet there's no minutes for the next follow-up meeting because it's obviously such a damning issue. Thank you for that. Okay.
Deputy, did you want to let Deputy Mishari in, or
yeah?
Deputy Mishari.
Thanks. Okay, just on the same thread, and Deputy Kelly has covered a lot of it, but the letter from Professor Burke of July 2017 to Gillette Cowan, which was copied to Dr. Henry. I just want to read two bits from that for the record because I think they're important. Where Professor Burke says, the guidelines outlined do appear to put an undue onus on the treating clinician rather than the screening programme to communicate directly with the patient in cases where the audit process has led to a change in the diagnosis. This then compels the treating gynaecologist to engage in open disclosure with the patient re the initial cytology findings. This is the potential to implicate the local treating consultant and his or her institution in what constitutes a misdiagnosis. The consequences of this could obviously have potential negative consequences for both the consultant and the institution. So obviously we're talking about legal recourse for patients, and and I think that's what it's all about. And that's over a year ago that everybody, without prejudice to individuals, but everybody was covering their ass from a legal perspective, and really the patient wasn't central to these considerations. And like I said earlier on, everybody felt that they were doing their role, but critical links in the chain were not doing their role. And I think we know who they are. I don't know whether it's possible. I know there's not possible to compel a private citizen to come and talk to us, but it would indeed be useful, I think, if the former clinical director chairman were contacted to see.
Agreed.
Would they like to
second that? I think it's a very good suggestion.
To join us.
I have a load of other people as well.
I think that would be very, very helpful, particularly in the light of what Dr. O'Keefe had said throughout the day. Several times had said that one person is missing here that might be able to fill in some gaps. In the various memos that go back, including the February one, in terms of audit development process, it says the people consulted with the State's Claims Agency. Were they consulted along the way, Dr. O'Keefe? Were they in the loop, as it were? Was there any advice to them how you should handle things from a legal perspective?
I was told that they were in the loop, so I don't know, John, do you want to comment in relation to that?
One meeting with the State Claims Agency, the clinical risk, I don't know their full title, nothing to do with legal, it was to do with the assessment of risk.
Would they have ventured any advice, such as, yeah, absolutely,
no.
No advice at all?
No, it wasn't on the legal side, it was on their clinical risk, their head of clinical risk, to give advice on how we would categorise
their whole function is legal. So,
Deputy, this actually came up yesterday at the Health Committee, and one of the things that I didn't
get that question at all. What do you think I'm asking, by the way?
One of the things I just offered at the committee, because I think it will help on this, is that within the functions of the State Claims Agency is risk management, and they advise the health services on good risk management practice. So as well as managing legal claims, they seek to promote safety culture and management of risk. Yeah,
we established actually the last day that they were in with us. I was asking in the cases, and they're about 50%, according to Mr. Brian, in cases that are settled without admission of liability, they had no role in recommending or weren't aware whether there was follow-up monitoring or training in relation to physicians or practitioners who may have been associated with that case. Can you confirm that to be the case as well?
I can confirm that that's what they said to you last week.
And can you confirm that that's the case in reality?
In the Health Service Executive?
Yeah.
I think maybe somebody from the Executive could comment on that.
So let's say there was a gynecological complaint that a child was born with cerebral palsy, they go to court, they win without admission of liability. Is the relevant physicians associated with that subject to any ongoing or process of retraining, monitoring by a superior or a peer for a period? And you know, I was led to believe by them they certainly don't recommend it, which would seem to be a bit of a failure on the risk management side in terms of helping you along and patient safety for the future and good practice. So can you shed any further light on that?
I'm not really sure if there's a policy which is written down in that respect, but in any health jurisdiction, you would normally expect that there would be something where if somebody wasn't actually appropriately deploying their skills, they needed updated, or they weren't using best practice, that there would be a period of training that would be required.
I'm like you. I would expect that, but I suppose I'm depending, and I'm very conscious that yourself, Mr. McGallion, are new brooms, and wish you well in your views, so in your positions. But I have reason to believe, as you rightly said, there is nothing written down. There is no protocol that when, let's say, the Carpenter family, who had a settlement there last week or the week before, after much celebrated 10 weeks of mediation, which of course followed 5 years of litigation. But anyway, that was settled without admission of liability. And I'm just wondering if nurses, registrars, consultants, administrators, or anybody else are subject to a process of monitoring, retraining, and are there protocols or written down policy around that?
So I think it's a very good question, because it's at many ways it's at the heart of some of the things we've been discussing today. Rosario Mannion has been here for 7 hours, 8 hours. She will have in her mind some knowledge of the operation of the disciplinary procedure. Okay, and I wonder if I can maybe just call on her to maybe give some real live examples in her mind of how that actually works.
Because I don't want to drag you out, and I'm sorry you didn't get to speak all day. I'm sure you're delighted. I'd say it fair as anyone else. I'm sure you're delighted she didn't.
Absolutely fine.
I don't necessarily want case-by-case examples.
No offence taken.
Yeah, but it's just that the state claims, and you did say about 50% are settled without admission of liability. So I suppose the yes/no, is there an official procedure of monitoring and retraining of those individuals?
Yes, there is.
Okay, and is that on every case?
It's the performance management system. we have signed up to in 3 successive national agreements. And every employee in the organisation is subject or should be subject to a performance management system.
But that's more of a kind of an annual appraisal situation recently, isn't it?
No, it's not. No, in terms of our people strategy, and the issue of culture has come up over the course of the day, whatever else, but we firmly believe that leadership and culture drives everything in relation to safer, better healthcare. And there's a specific section in that in relation to leadership accountability. And it's more than just words in a document. There's actually an action plan as to how we would be implementing accountability and performance management. And the Sláinte Care report that we hopefully will be moving ahead with the pace will allow us to really land that whole accountability.
But that's out there in the future. I'm more interested in the heretofore. It's great that we're going to have all these things in the future, but in terms of the here and now, and let's use the Carpenter case as an example. I don't know what physicians were involved. They're not named or anything in any cases that I've seen. So are the various people associated with that now subject to monitoring, retraining, supervision as a result of their proximity to a case that there was a problem in, albeit without admission of liability? If I just allow her first, and I'll come back to yourself, Dr. McKenna. Thanks.
Well, my understanding is the relevant clinical director in the given area would be aware of that and would ensure that appropriate supports are in place, mentoring, whatever the case may be, reskilling. In the past and over the course of my career, and I'm happy to look into this specific case, Deputy, and give you a
no, I was only giving it as an example. It's not because I'm from Sligo, it just was in the news lately, that's all.
Yeah, well, for instance, NCAS in Northern Ireland, the National Clinical Advisory Service, I know over the course of my career, I would have engaged them to come in and provide appropriate supports around individual consultants, etc., as the case may be. So, my understanding is, yes, there would be supports in place, but happy to look into your specific example. Yeah,
supports and protocol for supervision and monitoring for a period are two different things. A clinical director is unlikely to ring his colleague who he plays golf with on a Saturday saying, listen, John, I know you were associated with that case where there was a settlement without admission of liability, and here's what I think we need to do with you. I think that's unlikely to happen, and I'm just concerned.
Yeah. If there's a clinical issue in relation to a consultant, and for instance the medical council would be examining that issue, although that's entirely confidential, they would actually, under a section 60 as it's known, they would actually go to the High Court and we would be notified, and there would be appropriate mitigation put in place.
So the question is, and somebody can perhaps ask this to the State Claims Agency, of the 50% of cases that are settled without admission of liability, let's say in the last 12 months, if we could get an outline of what protocol was engaged in terms of supervision, monitoring, retraining and whatever if necessary. Dr. McKenna, you wanted to...
My real job is with the Women and Infants programme, and the obstetric settlements would account for about half of the state claims payout. So I have some familiarity with the with what happens to a large chunk of their money, as it were. I'm not aware of, personally, of any action following on from a settlement done by the State Claims Agency on any individual.
Okay, no, nobody taking an action against an individual, you mean a legal action? All right. So are you saying to me that you're not aware of any monitoring, supervision or retraining for any relevant personnel associated with cases that you're familiar with on the gynecological side?
I personally can't recall one.
Okay. No. So I would suggest we're learning a big lesson here. That admission of liability, that settlement without admission of liability seems to constitute a financial out for the state, but it may not represent best practice in terms of avoiding a repetition of the same instance. And I would ask, again, I have no medical training, from a common sense perspective, we need a policy on that and a demonstrative thing that without admission of liability, everyone associated with that case needs to go through this programme. So that we're
coming in to support you on that, just as chairman, we'd want to detail for yourself and the State Claims Agency to work up, the learning process from these is what Deputy McSharry is about, and preventative for issues arising. And if it's not happening, that's a big problem. I understood here over previous years that there was a process involved of seeing what lessons could be learned and all that. I understood that. Yeah. You're
not going to be able to do it on your own, with respect.
No, with the state claims agency. Yeah, but you come back to us.
This is going to need a holistic approach with all the boxes joined, I would suggest. And I'm sure it'll be resisted by clinicians. But nevertheless, for their own protection as well as the patients, it put the patient central rather than the limitation of the financial settlement.
We also need to describe in that response what the most basic level is of feedback in relation to cases. And my experience is that there is regular case mix or case review, particularly where there are adverse cases in a multidisciplinary team arrangements where you look back, you discuss the cases and you decide whether or not the action taken was appropriate. So I think what we probably need to do is to start at that most basic level, because if we get it right there, okay, then it solves problems for later on, as well as going up the ladder.
Good practice. I mean, I know it's completely different comparable. If a bank employee is in an armed robbery, they go through essential counselling. You know, so if I'm associated with something that didn't work out that well, I think it's reasonable that there would be appropriate follow-up. Just a couple of more questions. It's been an awful long day for you, so I don't want to be delaying you too much longer. The actual question to do with the State Claims Agency that I will end us off on that tangent was, did they venture any advice on the timing of informing patients, or that they should definitely be informed, tell them as quick as you can, don't tell them, cool the jets, hasten slowly, or anything along those lines in terms of their input into it, and what weighting that might have been given? I suppose, Mr Gleeson, it's yourself and Dr O'Keefe that are the ones that can, if you're able to answer that. Because I think that would be important. It might inform further questioning of the State Claims Agency by us, and particularly the weighting that's given to their advice in such a situation. Is it about the money, or is it about the patient, as we've seen at times that it has been? I asked actually at the last meeting that we'd be given a copy of the contract with the labs. Now, the Department of Finance standard position on things like this is, oh, that's commercially sensitive information. And I hate that expression. So I would ask for a copy of the contract to be sent to us, and if the commercially sensitive information is the price, cross out the price, redact the price, and send us the rest, because there's other aspects of it that we're very, very interested in looking at. The other thing, and again, the State Claims Agency answered this last week, but again, as you're present yourself, Mr Gleeson, and would have had some knowledge of the contracts, I had asked, is the contract as it exists and as it is written, does it give any recourse to the state as a whole in terms of the potential to pursue the laboratory for the very costly fallout from this, apart from the indemnity to the patient themselves?
I don't know.
Mr. Conlon.
I think with respect, that's probably a question that I would like to place in front of our legal advice. Okay, let's not just have a go at answering the question tonight. Let's just take it away, and we'll give you a solid answer on that, which is legally sound.
Because I think, in fairness to the state, to the people, I mean, this is all costing a lot of money. All you guys are here all day today and all week in various committees, and will be again, I'm sure. The cost to redress, Dr Scally, Commission of Investigation, we're looking at big money. So I'd like to see if there's a potential case for us to pursue, because if there is, you know, let's get it underway.
Good point.
And let me see. Nearly there. I am nearly there. Yeah, just to conclude, again, private citizens aren't compelled to come here. They may not want to be, but I think we would be abdicating our responsibility if we didn't extend an invitation to the former head of cervical check to come before us, and to thank everybody for what's been a very, very long day.
Mr. Houlihan just wanted a final remark.
I just wanted to make a comment just on what you were talking about, not to take it away in any way from the question that you were asking about the State Claims Agency and the follow-on in terms of settlements and so on, but just to give a wider context. There is an incident management framework. Incidents are logged. They should be logged in real time. and there should be a response to each one. Not everyone will require a significant investigation, but depending on the severity, there should be a response, there should be learning, and that should be happening much more in real term. That doesn't take away in any sense, but I just wanted to give that context since... Yeah.
But follow-up training, you've been associated, albeit without liability, therefore we have a mandatory programme you must now go through.
Okay, Mr Conlon, just to conclude now.
One of my first appearances at this committee. Can I thank you for your candour. I hope we've tried to answer as much as we possibly can. We will take some lessons away about the material that you need to get to you in good order in future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Best wishes in your role, Mr McGallion.
I hope you've taken away a lot more than what you just said. I would be absolutely devastated for the people I represent, for Vicky Phelan and for Stephen, if you only took away what you just said.
So Deputy, an apology is nothing if it's simply words, but it's not backed up by actions.
Okay, at this stage, I'm concluding now, but Mr Conlon, you're probably aware the HSE and the State Claims Agency are scheduled here before the summer break. You know, a long-standing commitment precisely to discuss issues like the medical negligence and the State Claims Agency bill of $2.5 billion. It's not all attributable to the HSE, and that has already been on the agenda as part of a discussion of your 2017 financial statements, which the Controller and Auditor General says you'll probably have to put your signature on next week, or today or tomorrow, he said, in the next day or so, because it normally happens around this time of the year. So you will be back in the normal course of events on a visit on that.
We obviously have to have other witnesses in as well.
Of course, and we will discuss that as part of our work programme. So now we're going to adjourn until our next public meeting, which is on Wednesday the 23rd of May, and I want to thank the witnesses from the Department of Health, HSE, Medical Council, National Cancer Registry and the CNAG. The meeting is now adjourned.